should be going up live as well. Okay, good. Looks like we got a couple of folks with us. So we got a couple folks with us. Let me mute myself so we're not. Okay, that's not going to work. Myself, so we're not. Okay, that's not going to work. Starting to get the feedback loop. Okay. Okay, is it working now with okay, it's showing up for me. What about now? Huh. Well, maybe, shows it live here, but let's go ahead and get started. It's good to be with everybody. I'm trying this out from home today, partly because I wanted to see what your experience was like. And so just wanted to check in and see how it works for us doing it this way. And so we're continuing to try to learn about how everything's going. So if you've got questions or topics that you want to talk about, just post them in the Facebook chat. And my understanding is YouTube is still not up live. No, I am not here in Tennessee. My mother wanted to know if I was still in Tennessee. So I am not, still at home in Topeka, and was in the backyard here at the house. Okay, YouTube is up now. Good, thank you. And we've got a couple folks watching there. And it looks like the screen, the picture there might be kind of pretty grainy. Don't know if I can clear that up or not. So it's good to see folks posting and saying good morning. So again, this is a time to check in, and if you've got questions or if there's some part of the sermon that you'd like to talk about, and there's really not any way I can lose the glare on my glasses. That's the product of two computer screens going. So trying to make that work. And Scott, can you check and see with Andrew if the sound is good on YouTube? So okay, good. I did a couple adjustments. I was afraid it wasn't going to work. So it's a beautiful day here in Topeka. Sun is shining, and just yes, I understand. I appreciate your comment, Patty, about the congregational song at the end. We changed things up a little bit in the order today as I was putting things together. it seemed to make sense to go from that call to worship that we used from Work of the People. We really appreciate all of their good work over there at that website, theworkofthepeople.com. And it seemed to make more sense, instead of coming out of that and going into a song, to move the song to the end. And we're still adapting. We appreciate folks who have been sharing songs with us. Rhonda and Dave and Janie's been working on some pieces as well. And Chiao has been, we're trying to figure out a way to get a good recording of her music as well. And so that we can make use of those in the service. And that has been a little bit of a challenge at times. But we're glad that the folks at iSong, that's their sister website, they make available those pieces. And so we're glad to be able to find that and make use of it. It's, I know, not quite the version of All Creatures of Our God and King that we sing. It's hymn number 22 in Child's Hymnal. Our version has just 4 verses, and that had 7. So okay. And so we have not been lighting the candle as a part of our worship stream, but we will look at that as a possibility. And encourage you to keep helping us think about these pieces as we move through the service. And we will continue to work on those pieces. Great. I'm really, it's good to hear that. And as we're looking for different options and different ways to incorporate music into the service, we're thinking about all kinds of different opportunities. And we're also, the search is continuing for a worship arts director, and that is ongoing. We'll keep you posted on that progress. Even though I know lots of things have been kind of put on pause, that has not been put on pause, and we're continuing to work on that, and hopefully continue to make some good progress on that procedure. I hope everybody's enjoying my white ceiling fan against my brown ceiling. It's driving me a little bit crazy. Probably doesn't matter to anybody else. Yeah, we are glad to be home, in our own home, and it was good to be able to go and be in Tennessee with my parents and my siblings and folks as we assess some things, and offered support to my parents as my dad's facing some challenges with his health right now, and we were glad for that opportunity. It it's always good to be able to be here and to be able to, just be at home. And we got home we got back to Topeka late on Thursday evening. It was a day driving through the torrential rain. And it was interesting to see how folks in other communities are handling things, sometimes very, very different from what's going on in Shawnee County and Topeka and Kansas, and other times very similar. And so, again, Scott and Donna, I really appreciate your all support and help in that process. You made our travel with the accessories that you provided for us much safer and much easier. Really appreciate that. Any other questions that you've got? Appreciate Scott and Donna and Andrew working this technology so that we can do this chat. I can't see the chat on my iPad. And so everything that I'm doing, I'm having to do that way. Scott. And so one of the questions that has just come in is, how can we as a church community support our brown and black brothers and sisters and the issues of systemic racism? You know, that's a tough question. And how do we respond to these circumstances? And one of the challenges is we have got to look at the ways in which systemic racism plays out throughout our entire community, in the church, in our schools, in our among our first responders, among our state government, among our federal government, and all of these components, and to be active in supporting them. Another way in which we can be supportive for folks like the situation in Brunswick, Georgia with Ahmaud Marbury and Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky, and George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota, is there are ways to protest. My family and I went to the protest yesterday at the state capitol as a witness of support. I wore a stole. Tracy wore a red stole as well. As clergy folks, we wanted our brothers and sisters in this community to know that we support them, and we want to be a part of the change and to be a part of the blossoming of God's garden of love in this community and in this country and around the world. One of the big things is as folks that we can do is listen. I know that sounds like it's not a big deal, but listening and hearing the stories of folks and not commenting on it, not trying to take it over. That's one of the things that we tend to do is, and not just with regard to this issue, but lots of different issues. We tend to listen briefly, get a topic, and then take over the story ourselves. And what's important here is to listen and not to do that, not take over the story, not try to make it our story in a way that's not ours to take. And so one of the most important things that we can do is to listen. Johnny Ray, the past leader of Week of Compassion, one of the great ministries of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ in the United States and Canada and really around the world, Week of Compassion. Johnny posted a picture at the end of the week on Facebook. It was a picture of his son and his grandson, and not his son's child, but his daughter's child. So it was an uncle and a nephew. And Matt, Johnny's son, longs to be a police officer. And Johnny's grandson, who is African American, longs to be a grown man. Those are really serious concerns, and figuring out how to respond to those in the community is really challenging. And those are real situations. And they're real situations for our folks in our congregation and for our folks in Topeka and Shawnee County in Kansas. And so finding ways to listen to the stories and to find ways to advocate for folks that are in this situation and responding to this. And this is a way in which we love our neighbors. This is a way in which we share God's radical love in the world. Remember the way that we define love. seeking the physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual well-being of our neighbors. And what it takes right now is listening. Right. Barb Runge commented about what she learned from Dr. King and being a part of the civil rights movement in the 60s about nonviolence. And I do not advocate the violence and the rioting. And, we're beginning to see some reports come out, and it will take some time, right? We can't, one of the important things in listening to the news, not just now, this has always been the case, but over time, is when we listen to the news, we have to wait for verification and confirmation and further details, because we're beginning to hear some reports that there are particular instigators that are maybe active in some of these communities in Minneapolis and other places that are traveling from outside of those cities or outside of those states and instigating the violence. And so violence is not going to be constructive, I don't think, and it's not the path that Jesus shows us. I think about that story in the Gospels of Jesus being arrested, and Peter draws his sword and cuts off one of the servants of the priest's ear. And Jesus' response to Peter is to put your sword away. And then he heals Malchus's ear. He puts it back on and heals him. Jesus, I think, chooses the path of nonviolent resistance. Certainly, he chooses the path of resistance, but I think he chooses the path of nonviolence. And, thinking about, so as we pay attention to the news, the importance of waiting for verification. One of the things with social media is something pops up on the news and then people start posting it and pushing it out on Facebook. And I encourage you to pause, to take a breath and to pause and just and ask yourselves, is sharing this going to be constructive or not? One of the things that Tracy and I talked about a fair amount as we traveled over the past couple of weeks, we got rid of cable television a couple of years ago. We made the decision that it was not something good or healthy in our lives, and it really wasn't necessary. We weren't taking advantage of this cost of the subscription, and so we made the decision, excuse me, to drop it. And we had a little bit of time these past couple of weeks where we had access to cable news, and we watched some of it. And what we again realized, it was not a new revelation, but it was a confirmation of what we were kind of knew already, is that most of the time cable news is not news. Most of the time it is commentary. It is interpretation. And so we have to be careful about how much of that we kind of take in to ourselves, and how much we're just regurgitating that other interpretation instead of gathering information and thinking through how it puts together and how our faith impacts that is a real important thing to be aware of. And so that's one of the things that we've got to pay attention to. That, I know my response to that question went lots of different places, so hopefully I wasn't too confusing. Yeah, so there's another question that's popped in about the Child Care Center. The Child Care Center has been open now for 2 weeks. We're being very careful about screening kids as they come in, and we've, excuse me, we're limiting parents coming in, and trying to watch that very carefully. And we're taking other steps to make sure things are cleaned and whatnot. We're just trying to go slowly and be very intentional in the process. And related to that is a question about the church building opening. The church is open. We're doing ministry, right? We're open. We're being the church. We're reaching out. We're tending to one another's concerns. We're engaged in prayer. We're worshiping together. The church is open. 1880 Southwest Gage is closed right now for Sunday worship and classes on Sunday morning and Sunday and during the week, but the church is still open. And so we're going to continue to be open in that respect. In terms of being back for classes in the building and for worship in the building, we're still wrestling with these questions. I think I have the name right. The Association of Choir Masters and some other similar groups to that that deal with choral song, congregational singing, those kinds of questions. If we went back to worship next Sunday, or even if we had done that today, we would not be able to sing congregationally. Even with mask. The indications are that singing is a major risk in terms of transmission of the coronavirus. And so thinking about how do we do that, how do we do congregational song? And do we just do somebody singing behind a plexiglass screen, but the congregation doesn't sing? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It would be a risk and a challenge. The other piece of worship, the component of worship, is communion. We have ordered some of the prepackaged communion. We ordered that back in mid-April. That is still back ordered. We still have not been able to receive those, and there is no indication of when it will ship. And so how do we do communion, and how do we do those parts of communion? Do we just invite everybody to bring their own? And if we do invite everybody to bring their own, what about the folks who come who didn't know to bring their own? And then how do we talk about inclusivity at the table and everybody being welcome, except if they don't have elements, they're not welcome? It's really a difficult kind of conundrum to sort that out. And so, and then there's the piece of fellowship. Fellowship time is going to be gone for the foreseeable future, even when we are back in the building for worship. And so as we think about fellowship time is going to be gone, but how do we maintain social distance? How do we maintain fellowship? Because, one of the things that I know some of our folks are going to want to do is they're going to want to hug one another, or they're going to want to shake hands, or they're going to want to pat somebody on the back, or they're going to want to, have an extended conversation and catch up. I encourage you to have those extended conversations on the phone, to do that over your backyard fence, to do that socially distanced. But I don't see how we do that in the church building safely at the moment. And so kind of my approach to that, it's ultimately not my decision, it's the board's decision, but my approach to that and my thoughts on that are that until we can do worship in the building face-to-face better than we can do online worship, maintaining our safety and well-being of all of our folks, it doesn't make sense. And I don't have a timeline for that. I don't know when that's going to happen. The reality is nothing has changed with the coronavirus since late February. in early March when we made the change to online only. And so we've made no breakthroughs medically. There have been no breakthroughs in terms of containment of the virus. What we did is we flattened the curve to protect our healthcare system and our most vulnerable in our community. And one of the struggles in the broader community is the question about reopening business and reopening, quote unquote, the economy. And I know that there's a lot of issues around that. There's a lot of concern around that. And how to do that safely and how to do that well. And so one of the things that we're going to be doing in the near future is we're going to be sending out a survey to gather some additional information from folks about where they're at, what their thinking is with regard to the situation and face-to-face worship and different components. We're not quite ready, and just that's kind of a preview. I wouldn't expect it necessarily this week. We're playing a little bit of catch up, but one of the things moving forward is we're going to be looking at how to do some of these things and wanting to get some input from folks that from our congregation, input from folks about how to do this and what it looks like. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions, topics that you want to talk about? The question was, has any information come out about the congregation across the street from 1880 Southwest Gage, across the street from our physical building information? So to my knowledge, no additional hotspots in churches have been identified by Shawnee County Health Department. I know that has been a great concern of theirs, that congregations would become hotspots. And so we're trying to keep up with that and keep up with that information and understand what's going on in the community. It looks to me like, again, I'm playing a little bit of catch up on this, but it looks to me like there is some dissension in the county about process of reopening and each of these steps. And so we're gonna continue to pay attention to that and continue to choose to be safe. Other questions, other topics that you want to ask about? Okay. Thanks, Scott. If there is anything else that you all want to inquire about, I'm glad to try to answer the question if we can. Okay, so we're going to continue to do morning prayers Monday through Saturday. We don't do those on Sunday. We'll continue to do morning prayers. I appreciate your patience. The first week I was gone, I reposted some previous sessions. And then this past week I went back to live sessions, posted to Facebook and to YouTube, and we'll continue with that this week. We will continue to find additional ways to connect with folks and engage folks. And so one of the other things that we encourage you to do is to invite your friends, your family, your neighbors to join you for worship on Sunday mornings, to join you for morning prayer online. It's a way in which we can connect with more folks and engage them in the ministry of our congregation. And so one of the things that Diane Jenkins has done she started this early on, is she started doing a watch party and inviting her family and friends from other communities even to join in. And so that's a great way to do that, and to find excuse me, a great way to do that and to find ways to connect with folks. So encourage you to do that on Sunday mornings or with the morning prayers. And so great way to do that. And I know that we've got some folks connecting from Kentucky, from Tennessee, where I've got family. Some of that's family, some of that is not family. We've got folks connecting in Colorado. We've connected with former members, folks who live in other parts of the country, folks in Oklahoma. Scott's parents are watching, and we've had folks from El Salvador, folks that we worked with on the medical mission trip, as well as the 2 building projects that we did there. Ricardo, the engineer, and some other folks in El Salvador have joined us as well. So, one of the gifts of the technology is we can reach out in far larger circles. And so let's find ways to do that. Let's find ways to connect with folks. Any other questions? Okay. So I think we're going to kind of wrap this this chat up for today. We will continue to do this. I wonder if it is most helpful to do this on a weekly basis, or to do this on maybe a bi-weekly basis or once a month basis. If you've got some thoughts on that, just shoot me a Facebook message or shoot me an email, and I'd be glad to hear from you on that. We're just trying to assess what's most helpful with regard to that. I'm glad to do the chat. I appreciate the opportunity to connect and to talk further. It's good for me personally, but it may not be the most helpful thing in terms of overall. And so we're just trying to assess that balance. So as you've got that info, please, or you have that opinion, please let me know. I'd welcome that opportunity. So have a blessed Pentecost Sunday, and may God's Ruach, God's Spirit, God's breath, and the winds of God blow through us and bring us healing and hope and love, and help us contribute to the blossoming of God's garden of love. Go in peace. God be with you this day. Thanks for joining us. It's great to be with you this morning.